I spent 2 years warning them, presenting every data point, every damning detail. But to the board of directors, I was just another young female employee obsessed with numbers they didn't want to see. They laughed at me, belittled me, dismissed everything I said. They thought their empire was untouchable, that I was nothing more than an irritating voice in their perfectly orchestrated symphony of lies. Until the day my carefully preserved evidence detonated like a bomb in their boardroom, bringing their entire house of cards crashing down around them. My name is Emily Hartman, and at 32, I thought I'd finally made it. Senior financial analyst at Wexford Dynamics. It had the kind of ring that made my parents proud at dinner parties and silenced the relatives who'd wondered why I'd buried myself in spreadsheets instead of finding a husband. The title came with a corner cubicle on the 42nd floor of the Apex Tower in downtown Ravenhill, where the city's financial district met its tech corridor in a collision of old money and new ambition. Wexford Dynamics was the kind of company that looked perfect from the outside. Our lobby featured a 60-foot living wall of tropical plants, irrigated by recycled water from our state-of-the-art filtration system. The marketing materials boasted about our revolutionary energy storage solutions, how we were powering tomorrow's sustainable future today. Fortune had named us one of the most innovative companies 3 years running. Our stock price had tripled since I'd joined 5 years ago. But I knew something most people didn't. Beautiful facades often hide the ugliest truths. Every morning, I'd arrive at 7:30 sharp, my heels clicking against the marble floors with the precision of a metronome. The executive elevator, the one I'd finally earned access to just 6 months ago, would whisk me up past the lower floors where junior analysts hunched over their screens, past the middle management maze of meeting rooms and false promises, up to where the real decisions were made. Or where they were supposed to be made. The 42nd floor was a different world. Here, the cubicles gave way to glass offices, the fluorescent lights softened to warm LEDs, and the coffee came from a machine that cost more than most people's cars. This was where the senior leadership team operated, where numbers became narratives and data transformed into destiny. My workspace sat strategically between the executive suite and the main analytical floor, close enough to power to feel its pulse, but not quite inside the inner circle. It was a placement that said everything about how they saw me, useful, necessary, but not quite one of them. The men who passed my desk each morning, always men except for Monica Graves from PR, would nod acknowledgement without really seeing me. To them, I was a function more than a person. The girl who made their numbers make sense. Richard Caldwell, our CEO, was particularly skilled at looking through me rather than at me. He was 61, with silver hair that belonged in a hedge fund advertisement and suits that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He had this way of speaking in the boardroom that made everything sound like destiny. Like Wexford Dynamics wasn't just a company, but a movement, a revolution. He'd built this empire from a garage startup 20 years ago, the classic American success story that business schools would dissect for decades. Monica Graves was different, but not better. The chief public relations officer was 45, sharp as a surgical scalpel, with perfectly styled auburn hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was the only woman on the board, and she wore that distinction like armor. But instead of extending a hand down to pull others up, she seemed determined to pull the ladder up behind her. She looked at younger women in the company the way a queen might look at potential rivals, with calculated assessment and barely concealed disdain. Then there was the rest of them. Thomas Barrett, the CFO whose gambling debts were the worst-kept secret in the financial department. David Kim, our chief technology officer who spent more time on his yacht than in the lab. And Marcus Webb, head of operations, whose nephew somehow kept getting promoted despite a string of failed projects. They all inhabited this floor like deities in their own mythology, convinced of their own invincibility. The numbers they showed the world were always perfect, too perfect. The growth curves they presented to shareholders were smooth as silk, unmarred by the volatility that plagued our competitors. The efficiency reports they celebrated in quarterly meetings bore no resemblance to the chaos I witnessed in our actual operations. I'd been naive enough, in the beginning, To think this was what success looked like. That maybe this was how all major corporations operated at this level. But as I gained access to more systems, more data, more truth, I began to see the cracks in the foundation, the discrepancies that couldn't be explained by rounding errors, the patterns that suggested something darker than mere incompetence. Ravenhill itself seemed to mirror the company's duality. By day, our district gleamed with progress. Construction cranes reaching toward the sky, tech workers flooding artisanal coffee shops, venture capital flowing like water. By night, the homeless camps grew larger in the shadows of our towers, and the city council meetings grew more contentious as housing prices soared beyond reason. We were a city divided between those who were winning the future and those being crushed beneath its wheels. I often worked late, long after the executives had left for their wine tastings and charity galas. In the quiet of the evening, with only the cleaning crew for company, I could hear the building's true voice, the hum of servers hiding secrets, the whisper of ventilation systems circulating stale ambitions, the groan of a structure built on compromised foundations. That's when I did my real work. When I could dig into the numbers without someone asking why I was looking at that particular dataset, or why I needed access to that specific server. That's when I began to understand that Wexford Dynamics wasn't just flawed, it was rotten to its core. The first irregularity appeared on a Tuesday evening in March, buried in a subsidiary ledger that most analysts would never bother to examine. I was reconciling quarterly projections when I noticed it. A series of transactions routed through our Cayman Islands subsidiary that didn't match any approved capital expenditure. $17 million, labeled as Strategic Infrastructure Development, had been transferred 6 times between different internal accounts before disappearing into a vendor payment to a company called Nexus Solutions. Nexus Solutions didn't exist, at least not in any meaningful way. It had a registration number, a postal box in Delaware, and nothing else. No employees on LinkedIn, no web presence, no industry footprint. It was a ghost company, and we'd paid it $17 million. I started pulling threads, staying late enough that the security guards began to recognize my tired smile. Each thread led to more threads, and soon I had a tapestry of financial manipulation that made my stomach turn. Over the past 18 months, Wexford Dynamics had funneled nearly $200 million through a network of shell companies. The money came from inflated R&D budgets, fictitious consulting fees, and phantom equipment purchases. Some of it cycled back into the company through manufactured revenue, sales to companies that were actually our own subsidiaries, creating the illusion of growth. But the worst part was the Environmental Compliance Fund. Wexford had received massive tax breaks and government grants for our revolutionary clean energy storage systems. The prototypes we showed investors were real, impressive even. But the mass production facilities we claimed to be building, they existed only on paper. The environmental impact studies we submitted to regulators were fiction, written by consultants who'd never set foot on our sites. We were selling promises we had no intention of keeping, using green technology as a shield for old-fashioned embezzlement. I documented everything meticulously. Screenshots, downloaded files, printed reports, all organized in a system only I understood. The evidence filled 3 encrypted drives that I kept hidden in different locations. I knew I was playing with fire, but I still believed in the system. I believed that if I showed them the truth, they would act. My first attempt was with Thomas Barrett, the CFO. I scheduled a meeting for a Friday afternoon, thinking he'd be more receptive at the end of the week. I prepared a condensed report, 20 pages of irrefutable evidence showing the financial irregularities. I even created visualizations to make the money trail impossible to ignore. Barrett barely looked at the documents. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, and gave me a paternal smile that made my skin crawl. "Emily, I appreciate your enthusiasm. But these kinds of complex financial structures are standard in companies of our size. Perhaps you're not quite experienced enough to understand the bigger picture. The bigger picture of fraud?" I kept my voice steady, professional. "These transactions violate SEC regulations. We're lying to shareholders." His smile disappeared. That's a very serious accusation. I'd be very careful about throwing around words like fraud without understanding the full context. Now, I have a golf meeting with investors. We'll discuss your concerns at a more appropriate time. That appropriate time never came. Instead, I received a memo the following Monday reassigning me to special projects, bureaucratic speak for being sidelined. But I didn't give up. I refined my presentation, added more evidence, and requested a meeting with the full board. It took 6 weeks to get on their calendar, 6 weeks of continued investigation, of watching millions more disappear into the labyrinth of fake companies. By the time I stood before them in the boardroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Ravenhill's skyline, I had documented over $300 million in fraudulent transactions. Richard Caldwell sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by Monica Graves and the rest of the board. They looked like a tribunal, and I was the one on trial. I connected my laptop to the presentation system, my hands steady despite the sweat gathering at the base of my spine. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to show you threatens the very existence of Wexford dynamics. For 45 minutes, I laid out the evidence, chart after chart, transaction after transaction, lie after lie. I showed them how the fraud wasn't just financial, it was existential. We were a clean energy company that hadn't produced a single commercial battery. We were an innovation leader whose R&D budget was being stolen by its own executives. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Monica Graves started laughing. It wasn't nervous laughter or shocked laughter. It was contemptuous, dismissive, cruel. This is what you've been wasting company time on. She looked around the table, inviting others to share her amusement. Creating conspiracy theories? These aren't theories, I insisted. These are facts, financial records from our own systems, which you accessed without authorization. Caldwell interrupted, his voice cold as winter steel. Ms. Hartman, I'm concerned about your mental state. This obsession with finding problems where none exist, it's troubling. Perhaps she's overwhelmed, David Kim suggested with false concern. The analytical department can be stressful for someone so young. Marcus Webb nodded sagely. I've seen this before. Bright young analysts who get in over their heads start seeing patterns that aren't there. It's like that movie, Beautiful Mind, wasn't it? Except without the genius part. They all chuckled at that. All except Barrett, who was studying his phone, avoiding my eyes. He knew. They all knew. This wasn't ignorance or misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated dismissal. I think Ms. Hartman needs some time to refocus her priorities. Caldwell concluded. Thomas, please work with HR to ensure she gets the support she needs. Meeting adjourned. I stood there as they filed out, chatting about weekend plans and market projections as if I hadn't just shown them evidence of massive fraud. Monica Graves paused at the door, looking back at me with something like pity. A word of advice. Emily, this company rewards team players, not whistleblowers. Decide which one you want to be. The dismantling of my career began the following Monday with surgical precision. My access to financial servers was revoked for system maintenance. My parking spot in the executive garage was reassigned due to restructuring. The quarterly reports I'd been leading were handed to Derek Morrison, a junior analyst with half my experience but the right chromosomes and a talent for never asking uncomfortable questions. HR scheduled me for mandatory wellness sessions with Dr. Patricia Reeves, a corporate psychologist whose office felt more like an interrogation room. She'd lean forward with practiced concern, asking about my stress levels, my work-life balance, whether I'd been experiencing any paranoid ideation lately. I knew every word was being documented, building a case for my instability. I'm perfectly fine, I told her during our third session, maintaining eye contact. My only stress comes from watching this company commit fraud. She made a note, her pen scratching against paper like an insect. This persistent belief in conspiracy theories is concerning. Emily, have you considered that perhaps you're projecting personal frustrations onto your work environment? The gaslighting was methodical, Relentless. Emails I sent would mysteriously disappear from servers. Meeting invitations would be recalled minutes after I accepted them. Documents I created would be edited without track changes, making me look incompetent when I presented outdated information. They were rewriting reality around me, making me question my own perceptions. My colleagues began treating me like I was radioactive. Sarah Kim, who used to grab lunch with me every Wednesday, suddenly had perpetual conflicts. James Patterson, who'd mentored me through my first year, wouldn't make eye contact in the elevator. Even the security guards seemed to watch me with new suspicion, as if I might snap at any moment. The whispers followed me through the halls. Did you hear she accused the board of stealing? I heard she had a breakdown in the boardroom. They say she's been stalking executives, going through their trash. Each rumor was more elaborate than the last, painting me as unhinged, dangerous, a liability. The worst betrayal came from Marcus Thompson, whom I'd considered a friend. We'd started at Wexford the same year, had celebrated promotions together, complained about corporate politics over after-work drinks. I thought I could trust him. So when he invited me for coffee one afternoon, I was desperate enough for an ally to accept. Emily, people are worried about you, he said, stirring sugar into his latte with careful precision. This obsession with finding fraud, it's not healthy. It's not an obsession, Marcus. It's real. I have proof. Do you, though? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Or do you have a bunch of numbers you've misinterpreted because you're angry about being passed over for the senior management position? The accusation hit like a physical blow. What are you talking about? I never applied for senior management. That's not what people are saying. They say you expected that promotion, and when it went to Derek, you snapped, started fabricating this whole conspiracy to get revenge. That's insane. Derek's position isn't even... Marcus, you know me. You know I wouldn't. I thought I knew you, he interrupted. But the Emily I knew wouldn't access restricted servers without authorization, wouldn't make wild accusations against respected executives, wouldn't put her entire career at risk for some vendetta. I realized then that he wasn't trying to help. He was gathering intelligence, probably reporting back to them. The coffee invitation was just another manipulation, another way to document my instability. They got to you, I said quietly. What did they promise you? A promotion? Stock options? His face flushed. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This paranoia. Not everyone is out to get you. Emily. But they were. The next day, my computer was replaced for upgrades. And when I got it back, monitoring software had been installed. Every keystroke was being watched, every file access logged. They wanted to catch me gathering more evidence, give them grounds for termination beyond just mental instability. My performance review, which had been stellar just 6 months ago, was suddenly filled with areas of concern. My analytical work was described as lacking focus. My collaboration skills rated as needs improvement. My judgment labeled as questionable. It was character assassination by spreadsheet. I started experiencing panic attacks in the parking garage. My body recognizing the danger my mind was trying to rationalize away. My hands would shake as I badged into the building each morning. I lost 15 pounds in a month, unable to eat under the constant surveillance and psychological warfare. One evening, working late as always, though now it was because I had nowhere else to go, I found a note on my desk. No envelope, no signature, just a single line. Stop digging or they'll bury you with what you find. I looked around the empty office, but saw no one. The security cameras that monitored this floor would conveniently malfunction, I was sure. The message was clear. I wasn't just fighting corporate corruption. I was fighting for my career, my reputation, maybe even my safety. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the evidence I'd smuggled out piece by piece. Financial records, emails, recorded conversations, proof of everything they were doing. I had two choices: surrender and hope they'd let me quietly disappear, or fight back with everything I had. I thought about all the employees whose pensions were invested in this house of cards, the investors who believed in our false promises, The communities expecting the clean energy jobs we'd never create. The government grants stolen from legitimate research that could actually change the world. Then I thought about their smug faces in that boardroom, laughing at me like I was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. Monica's condescending advice, Caldwell's ice-cold dismissal, the way they'd choreographed my destruction without a moment's hesitation. I opened my laptop and began typing. If they wanted to bury me, I'd make sure they went down too. But this time, I wouldn't give them the chance to dismiss me. This time, I'd make it impossible for them to ignore the truth. The war was just beginning. The art of revenge, I learned, is not in the explosion. It's in the careful placement of every grain of gunpowder. For 3 months, I became someone I barely recognized, a corporate actress playing the role of the reformed employee. I attended the wellness sessions with manufactured enthusiasm. I submitted reports that were competent but unremarkable. I smiled at the people who'd betrayed me and thanked Monica Graves for her mentorship when she publicly humiliated me in meetings. Meanwhile, every evening, I built my arsenal. My apartment became a war room. One wall was covered with a timeline of fraudulent transactions, another with corporate structure diagrams showing the shell company network. I had 3 laptops running different VPNs, each dedicated to a different aspect of my investigation. I learned to code, teaching myself enough Python to write scripts that could scrape and analyze data. I studied forensic accounting through online courses, understanding how to present evidence in ways that couldn't be refuted or dismissed. The key was documentation, not just the fraud itself, but the cover-up. Every dismissive email from Barrett, every gaslighting session with HR, every edited document, I preserved them all. I used hidden recording apps during meetings, legal in our one-party consent state. I screenshotted Slack conversations before they could be deleted. I forwarded emails to multiple external accounts before they could vanish from servers. I also started building external validation for my evidence. I created anonymous accounts on financial forums, posting small pieces of information about Wexford's irregularities, watching as amateur investigators began noticing patterns. I leaked just enough to legitimate journalists to get them sniffing around, though not enough for them to break the story prematurely. I needed the explosion to happen on my timeline, not theirs. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at work, pretending to be broken, defeated, grateful for their patience with my difficulties. I let them think they'd won, that I'd been successfully reconditioned. I even went to Derek Morrison for advice on my assignments, stroking his ego while documenting his incompetence. Every humiliation was fuel for the fire I was building. My personal journal became my only outlet for the rage. Late at night, after hours of evidence gathering, I'd write, "They think they've declawed me, but they've only taught me to sharpen my teeth in private." Caldwell smiled at me today, that paternal smile that makes my skin crawl. "Good to see you're doing better, Emily," he said. I smiled back and thanked him for his support. He has no idea that I've traced $43 million of embezzled funds directly to his personal offshore accounts. Monica suggested I consider a lateral move to a regional office, corporate exile. I told her I'd think about it. She doesn't know I have recordings of her discussing bribing the environmental inspectors. They think I'm beaten. Let them think that. The condemned don't usually see the executioner sharpening the axe. By month 4, I had everything. Financial records showing $347 million in fraud. Emails explicitly discussing illegal activities. Recordings of board members acknowledging the crimes while deciding to cover them up. Evidence of bribed officials, fake environmental data, and securities fraud that would trigger SEC investigations. Most importantly, I had proof that they knew I was right and chose to destroy me anyway. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed a delivery mechanism that would be impossible to stop, impossible to discredit, impossible to ignore. That's when I started studying Wexford's public relations calendar. The company's biggest moment each year was the Q3 earnings call. Broadcast live to thousands of investors and streamed on financial networks. This year was special. Our supposed breakthrough in solid-state battery technology would be announced, along with a massive government contract that would triple our valuation. The announcement was scheduled for October 15th. I marked it on my calendar with a simple note: Justice Day. The first sign that they suspected something came in early September. I arrived at work to find my desk had been searched, subtly, professionally, but searched nonetheless. Papers were a millimeter out of place. My keyboard had been shifted slightly, and the dust pattern on my monitor stand was disturbed. They were looking for something, but my real evidence was nowhere near this building. Then came the technical audit. ET announced a routine security review that specifically targeted the analytics department. They installed new monitoring software, restricted our internet access, and began requiring supervisor approval for any data exports over 10 millibaud. They were closing the digital walls around me. Marcus Thompson approached me again, this time with less pretense. Emily, some people are concerned you might be planning something inadvisable, something that could hurt the company. The only thing I'm planning is my quarterly review presentation, I replied, maintaining eye contact. Though I appreciate the concern, I'm serious. If you're thinking about going to the press or the authorities, with what, Marcus? My delusions? My paranoid fantasies? I thought everyone agreed I was just a stressed-out analyst who couldn't handle the pressure. He studied me for a long moment. You're different lately. Calmer. That worries some people. Maybe the therapy is working, I said with a practiced smile. Dr. Reeves says I'm making excellent progress. But the pressure was intensifying. My company laptop was replaced again, this time with one that tracked every keystroke in real time. My access badge started recording not just which doors I opened, but how long I stayed in each area. They assigned me a new deskmate, Kevin Walsh, a senior analyst who'd previously worked in corporate security. He was friendly, chatty, and obviously reporting on my every move. One evening, working late, I noticed someone had been in my apartment. Nothing obvious, professional work again. But my neighbor's security camera, which I'd started checking regularly, showed a maintenance worker entering while I was at the office. They were searching for my evidence cache, but they wouldn't find it. I'd learned from their playbook. Everything important was scattered across multiple locations, some physical, some digital, none traceable to me. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was eating lunch alone, as usual, when a young IT specialist named Logan Pierce sat down across from me. He was 26, brilliant, and had the kind of ethical hacking background that companies like Wexford both feared and desperately needed. You know they're watching you, he said without preamble. I considered my response carefully. Everyone needs a hobby. They've tasked me with deep diving your digital footprint. Every email, every file access, every website you visited on company networks for the past 2 years. Find anything interesting? He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Yeah, I found that you were right about everything, and that they're going to fire you next week. They've already drafted the termination letter, poor performance, violation of company security policies, and concerning behavioral patterns. They're just waiting for legal to sign off. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Why are you telling me this? Because I also found evidence of them destroying documents. Emails discussing what to delete, which servers to wipe. They're not just covering up the fraud, they're covering up the cover-up. And they're going to pin some of it on you. There are falsified documents with your digital signature, backdated to make it look like you were part of the embezzlement scheme. The room seemed to spin. They weren't just discrediting me, they were framing me. Can you prove this? I can do better than that, Logan said. I can help you destroy them. But we have to move fast. They're planning to execute everything on Friday the 13th, 2 days before the earnings call. They want you gone and discredited before the announcement. Why would you risk your career for this? He was quiet for a moment. My sister worked for a company like this. They destroyed her when she tried to report sexual harassment by a senior executive. She never recovered. Killed herself 2 years later. I've been waiting for a chance to fight back against corporate monsters. This is it. That night, Logan and I met at a 24-hour diner outside the city. He showed me what he'd found. It was worse than I'd imagined. Not only were they framing me, but they'd also prepared a narrative where I was the mastermind behind the fraud. Driven crazy by my obsession with advancement, they'd manufactured a trail of evidence that would send me to prison for decades. "We need to accelerate your timeline," Logan said. "Whatever you were planning for the earnings call, it has to happen sooner." "No," I said, an idea forming. "Let them fire me. Let them execute their frame job. But you're going to help me turn their own weapons against them." "How?" "They're about to destroy all the evidence of their crimes, right? But what if we make copies first? What if their destruction actually triggers a dead man's switch that releases everything? And what if it happens live, during their moment of triumph, when they can't stop it?" Logan's eyes widened. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that would have terrified me 6 months ago. Now it felt like hope. "You want to use their own earnings call against them. I want to destroy them with their own hubris, and you're going to help me build the bomb." Friday the 13th arrived with unusual September heat. I dressed carefully that morning, my best suit, the one I'd worn to my initial interview 5 years ago. If they were going to execute me professionally, I'd face it with dignity. Logan had worked through the night, implementing our plan. Everything was in place. At 9 a.m. sharp, Kevin Walsh escorted me to HR. The walk felt like a funeral procession, colleagues averting their eyes as I passed. In the conference room, Patricia Reeves sat with 2 security guards and a lawyer I didn't recognize. The termination packet was an inch thick. "Emily," Patricia began with manufactured sympathy, "I'm afraid we have some serious concerns about your recent activities." They went through the charges methodically. Unauthorized access to restricted systems, suspected corporate espionage, evidence of financial irregularities traced to my login credentials. Each accusation was supported by fabricated evidence, digital breadcrumbs they'd planted to paint me as the architect of the very fraud I'd uncovered. "We could pursue criminal charges," the lawyer said, sliding a document across the table. "However, if you sign this agreement, admitting to mental health issues that impaired your judgment, accepting responsibility for your actions, and agreeing never to discuss Wexford dynamics publicly, we're prepared to let you leave quietly." The NDA was comprehensive. It would silence me forever, prevent me from ever revealing what I knew. In exchange, they wouldn't pursue the false charges they'd manufactured. It was brilliantly evil, use my own discoveries against me, then force me to bury them. "I need time to read this," I said. "You have 10 minutes. Patricia replied, "Then security will escort you out." I read every word, memorizing the sections that explicitly mentioned the financial records I'd accessed. They were inadvertently confirming which transactions they were most worried about. When the 10 minutes expired, I signed it. Patricia looked surprised. She'd expected more fight. "You're making the right choice," she said. Security escorted me to my desk, where a box of my personal items was already packed. Kevin Walsh watched as I was marched to the elevator. In the lobby, they took my badge, my parking pass, my company laptop. The security chief, a man named Rodriguez who'd always been kind to me, looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry about this, Ms. Hartman," he said quietly. "It's not your fault," I replied. "You're just doing your job." As I walked out of the Apex Tower for what they thought was the last time, my phone buzzed. A text from Logan. "Package delivered, timer set, 54 hours until showtime." I drove home, knowing they were probably following me. Let them. Inside my apartment, I found what I expected. A final search had been conducted while I was being fired, but they'd found nothing because there was nothing to find. All my physical evidence had been destroyed weeks ago, after being digitized and encrypted. The digital copies lived on servers they'd never think to check. Gaming platforms, photo-sharing sites, obscure forums, fragmented and encrypted, waiting for Logan's program to reassemble them. That evening, Monica Graves called me personally. "I heard about what happened today. I'm sorry it had to end this way. Emily, you had such potential." "I understand," I said. "Playing my role, I accept responsibility for my actions." "Good. I hope you get the help you need. And Emily? That NDA is ironclad. Any violation, any whisper about Wexford, and we'll destroy you. The evidence we have will send you to federal prison for 20 years. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Monica. She hung up, satisfied. They thought they'd won. The dangerous whistleblower had been neutralized, discredited, and silenced. The earnings call could proceed as planned. The fraud could continue. The empire would endure. Logan and I met at midnight in an abandoned warehouse he used for his legitimate cybersecurity consulting. His setup was impressive. Multiple screens, servers humming, cables everywhere. "Show me," I said. He pulled up the code. It was elegant in its simplicity. At exactly 11:47 a.m. on October 15th, during the live earnings call, a program would activate. It would use Wexford's own broadcasting system to display everything, every document, every email, every recording. The evidence would appear on the main presentation screen, stream to thousands of viewers, and simultaneously upload to every major financial news outlet, the SEC, the FBI, and the Justice Department. "The beauty is," Logan explained, "it'll look like it's coming from inside their system because it is. I've embedded it in their presentation software. When they trigger the slideshow for the earnings call, they'll trigger the bomb. They'll try to cut the feed, but I've created redundancies. The more they try to stop it, the more channels it'll broadcast to. What about the frame job against me? That's the best part. I've included all their communications about framing you, the emails planning it, the documents showing the fabrication, even recordings from their security cameras showing them planting evidence. You won't just be vindicated, you'll be the hero who exposed them." We spent the weekend refining everything, adding a final touch, a video compilation of board members dismissing my warnings, laughing at me, discussing how to destroy me. It would play first, setting the stage for the document dump that would follow. "Are you ready for this?" Logan asked as we finished. "Once this happens, there's no going back." I thought about the last 6 months, the humiliation, the gaslighting, the attempted destruction of my career and sanity, the crimes they were committing while painting me as the criminal. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. October 15th dawned clear and cold. I sat in my apartment, laptop open to the financial news networks, watching the pre-market coverage of Wexford Dynamics. The stock was up 3% in anticipation of the announcement. Richard Caldwell was being interviewed on CNBC, radiating confidence about the company's future. "We're about to change the energy storage industry forever," he proclaimed. "What we're announcing today will establish Wexford as the dominant player for the next decade." The earnings call was scheduled for 11:30 a.m. Eastern, broadcast from Wexford's headquarters auditorium. They'd invited major shareholders, analysts, and media. It would be their biggest audience ever, exactly what I'd counted on. At 11:15, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Emily." It was Caldwell. "I wanted to call and make sure you're not planning anything foolish today." "I'm just sitting at home, watching the news," I replied truthfully. "Congratulations on the big announcement." "Yes. Well, I want to be clear. We have security monitoring all communications channels. Any attempt to interfere with today's call will be traced back to you." I signed the NDA. "Richard, I couldn't say anything even if I wanted to." He paused, perhaps detecting something in my tone. "For your sake, I hope that's true." At 11:25, Logan texted, "All systems green, countdown initiated." I watched the live stream begin. The auditorium was packed, the stage elaborately set with the Wexford logo gleaming behind the podium. The board of directors sat in a row, looking like conquering heroes. Monica Graves opened with PR speak about innovation and sustainability. Thomas Barrett presented the cooked financial numbers, showing explosive growth. Then Caldwell took the stage for the main announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to announce that Wexford Dynamics has secured a $2.3 billion contract with the Department of Energy for our revolutionary solid-state battery technology." The audience erupted in applause. The stock price jumped another 5%. Caldwell basked in the moment, then turned to the screen behind him. Let me show you exactly how we're going to transform the future. He clicked the presentation remote. The screen flickered. Instead of their polished slideshow, a video began playing. It was the board meeting where I'd presented my evidence. But this version included their response, the parts I'd secretly recorded. Monica's laughter filled the auditorium. This is what you've been wasting company time on? Creating conspiracy theories? Then Caldwell's voice. Ms. Hartman, I'm concerned about your mental state. The board members on stage froze, their faces draining of color. Caldwell frantically clicked the remote, but the video continued. Now it showed a private conversation between him and Barrett after I'd left the room. She found everything, Barrett was saying. The Cayman accounts, the shell companies, all of it. Then we bury her. Caldwell replied on screen. Destroy her credibility, make her look insane. No one believes a crazy woman. The audience murmured in confusion. Caldwell shouted to cut the feed, but it was too late. The screen split into multiple panels, each showing different evidence. Financial records scrolled past. Emails discussing the fraud appeared. The falsified environmental reports were displayed alongside the real data showing toxic waste dumping. Then came the audio recordings, Monica bribing an EPA inspector, Barrett discussing how to hide money from the IRS, Kim admitting the battery technology didn't actually work, Webb arranging kickbacks from suppliers. The coup de grace was the documentation of how they'd framed me, emails planning the false evidence, security footage of them planting documents, the fabricated digital trail they'd created, and finally, my original report, the one I'd presented to them, proving I'd tried to stop this. The auditorium exploded into chaos. Investors were screaming. Reporters were frantically calling their newsrooms. The board members tried to flee the stage but found security, the real FBI, who'd been alerted by the automatic transmission, blocking the exits. The stock price went into freefall. Trading was halted after it dropped 47% in 3 minutes. Financial networks cut to breaking news coverage. Massive fraud at Wexford Dynamics scrolled across every business channel. Monica Graves attempted damage control, grabbing a microphone. This is obviously a sophisticated cyber attack. These documents are fabricated. But the screen switched to her own emails, discussing the cover-up in detail, including one where she wrote, Emily Hartman was right about everything. We need to destroy her before she destroys us. Caldwell stood at the podium, looking like he'd aged 20 years in 20 seconds. He saw the FBI agents approaching with handcuffs. The emperor of Wexford Dynamics, the man who'd built this company from nothing, who'd believed himself untouchable, was about to lose everything. The live stream continued for another 10 minutes before someone finally managed to cut it, but it didn't matter. The evidence was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. The SEC announced an immediate investigation. The Justice Department issued a statement. Trading partners terminated contracts. The government suspended the $2.3 billion deal. By 2 p.m., all board members had been arrested. By 3 p.m., Wexford Dynamics had lost 78% of its value. By 4 p.m., bankruptcy lawyers were circling like vultures. I watched it all from my apartment, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace, not joy, not triumph, just peace. The truth was finally out. Justice was being served. Logan called as the sun was setting. Check your bank account. I logged in to find a $3.7 million deposit. The SEC whistleblower reward, 15% of the recovered fraudulent funds. Automatically triggered by the evidence transmission. You did it, he said. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. What are you going to do now? I looked around my apartment, at the war room I'd built, at the months of obsession and planning covering my walls. Then I looked out the window at Ravenhill's skyline, where the Apex Tower stood dark. Wexford's offices already being raided. I'm going to disappear for a while, maybe write a book, maybe just breathe. And then I'll find the next Wexford Dynamics, because they're out there. Logan, Companies just like this one, destroying lives, stealing futures, counting on people being too scared or too broken to fight back. The corporate world won't know what hit them. Good, I said, allowing myself a small smile. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them look at every analyst, every accountant, every employee they've wronged and wonder, is this the one who will bring us down? I didn't attend the trials. I didn't need to see them in orange jumpsuits, didn't need to hear their lawyers' desperate attempts to shift blame. The evidence spoke for itself. 347 million counts of it. Richard Caldwell got 25 years. Monica Graves got 18. The rest of the board received sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. Wexford Dynamics dissolved into bankruptcy. Its assets liquidated to pay back defrauded investors and the government. The media called me a hero. Congress invited me to testify about corporate whistleblower protections. Job offers poured in from Fortune 500 companies wanting to hire the woman who took down Wexford. I declined them all. Instead, I used the SEC reward to establish the Hartman Foundation for Corporate Accountability. Logan became my first hire, heading our technical division. We developed tools for employees to anonymously report fraud, systems to protect evidence, networks to connect whistleblowers with lawyers and journalists. In our first year, we helped expose corruption at 13 major corporations. Marcus Thompson reached out once, 6 months after the collapse. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he'd been scared for his job, his mortgage, his family. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. Dr. Patricia Reeves lost her psychology license when recordings surfaced of her deliberately gaslighting employees on behalf of corporate interests. She'd done it to 17 people before me, destroying careers and minds for a monthly retainer. The last I heard, she was working as a life coach in Arizona, which seemed like punishment enough. The Apex Tower stands empty now, a 47-story monument to hubris. Sometimes I drive past it at night, looking up at the dark windows of the 42nd floor where I once worked. Where I discovered the truth. Where they tried to break me. Where I decided to break them instead. I never found out who left that warning note on my desk. Stop digging, or they'll bury you with what you find. Maybe it was a threat. Maybe it was someone trying to protect me. Either way, they were wrong. I didn't stop digging. And in the end, I buried them with what I found. The financial press still analyzes the Wexford collapse as a cautionary tale about corporate governance and the importance of listening to whistleblowers. Business schools teach it as a case study in how covering up small frauds leads to bigger ones, how silencing dissent creates echo chambers of criminality. They focus on the financial metrics, the regulatory failures, the market impact. But for me, it was never about the money or the fame or even the justice, really. It was about that moment in the boardroom when they laughed at me, when they decided I was nothing, when they thought they could destroy me because I was young, female, and alone. They were wrong about all of it. I wasn't alone. Logan proved that. Being female didn't make me weak, it made me underestimated, which became my greatest weapon. And youth? Youth meant I had less to lose and more energy to fight. Sometimes young professionals reach out to me, usually women, always with the same story. They found something wrong at their company, tried to report it, and been shut down. They ask for advice, for help, for hope. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. Document everything, trust carefully, plan meticulously. And remember, the people laughing at you today might be in handcuffs tomorrow. The corporate world wants to believe Wexford was an anomaly, a perfect storm of greed and incompetence that could never happen again. They institute new policies, hire compliance officers, conduct ethics training. They do everything except address the fundamental problem. When power concentrates without accountability, corruption follows as surely as shadows follow light. There are other Wexfords out there. Other boards dismissing warnings. Other executives destroying whistleblowers. Other companies built on lies, propped up by fraud, sustained by silence. They look at what happened to Caldwell and his crew and think, we're smarter, we're more careful, we won't get caught. Maybe they're right. Maybe they've learned from Wexford's mistakes. Maybe their fraud is more sophisticated, their cover-ups more complete, their destruction of dissidents more thorough. Or maybe, right now, in some cubicle on some floor of some gleaming tower, there's another analyst staring at numbers that don't add up. Maybe she's young, underestimated, dismissed. Maybe they're laughing at her too, telling her she doesn't understand how the real world works. Maybe she's taking notes. Maybe she's making plans. Maybe she's building a bomb out of their own lies, waiting for the perfect moment to light the fuse. I hope she is. I hope there are thousands like her, in every company, in every industry, ready to hold power accountable, ready to fight back against those who think they're untouchable, ready to prove that sometimes, just sometimes. David doesn't need a sling to beat Goliath. Sometimes all you need is the truth and the courage to tell it. The board ignored my warnings. They dismissed my evidence. They tried to destroy me. Then my evidence destroyed them. And I walked away from the explosion without looking back. Because the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served at exactly 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Broadcast live to the world. Impossible to stop. Impossible to deny. Impossible to survive. Justice has a particular sound. It's not a gavel or a verdict. It's the click of a presentation remote, activating a truth too powerful to contain. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about corporate accountability and standing up for what's right. Your own experiences and perspectives mean everything to this community.